Hi everyone, today I'll be installing Portworx on VMware. Let's get started. What I'm going to do is basically use the Portworx installation procedure that is described in our documentation page to install Portworx on vSphere. When using Portworx to install on vSphere, it integrates with our VMware environment to automatically create the required storage devices, which makes the deployment really easy. So what do we need to get started with the deployment? We need at least some hosts of obviously one control plane, recommended is 3, and then 3 worker nodes for the storage cluster. So what I did to prepare is basically I prepared a single master node and then 3 worker nodes, small environment that I'll use for my Portworx installation. I go into my one of my worker nodes, which you can see, it has 4 CPUs, 16 gigs of memory. And if we specifically go into the disks, it has 1 disk which is used for the operating system. Okay, so let's go back to my overview. The first step you want to do is make sure you have the credentials that are required to connect to vSphere from Portworx to be able to create those drives that Portworx needs to deploy its software-defined storage layer on top of. I already got this set up, so nothing for me to do here. Next step is that we need to create a secret, which is used in the Kubernetes environment to basically store the username and the password in the Kubernetes environment. Portworx will use this secret to connect to vCenter and basically automatically create the required resources. So let's go ahead and do that. This is my environment. I'll log into the control plane that we saw, just to show that those are the nodes we just saw as well. We have got the master node and then the 3 worker nodes with the IP addresses that are also shown in the VMware environment over here. Good. Now that we've got that sorted, I've already created a vSphere.yaml environment, which basically includes that secret. So I'll just apply that secret to my environment. And now we can see kubectl get secret -n kube system. We basically see that we've just created this new secret 10 seconds ago. And if I describe that secret, we can see that it's called PX vSphere secret. It's in the kube system namespace, which is where I'll be installing Portworx, and it has the username and the password in there. Good, so we've got that figured. Next step in the documentation is basically go to the spec generator, which is our PX Central website. So let's click that link. For this install, I'll select Portworx Enterprise, go with next. I'm using the operator for the installation, which is also the preferred way that is described here in the documentation. And just select the latest installation of Portworx using the internal etcd database. You'd be using an external database, etcd database, if you use in the Metro cluster. But for now, I'm just going to install a standalone Portworx cluster. So let's go ahead. Next step is we select our cloud provider, which basically means that Portworx will integrate with your on-prem vSphere cloud to automatically create the drives that are required for this implementation. So I could change the size of the drives, and basically once I deploy Portworx, it will automatically create these 2 drives. The first drive is used for the etcd database, and the second drives are used for the storage pool. Next thing I want to do is enter the details of my vCenter server, so the IP address, then also the data store that I want to store the drives that Portworx will automatically create on. And finally, I reference that secret that we just created. So let's hit next. I'll not change anything on the networking side. This is just plain Kubernetes, so nothing to do over that side. I'll also enable the new telemetry pieces and give my cluster a name and hit finish. Let's do agree. Now the next thing we want to do here is basically install the Portworx operator. So let's go ahead and do that. And before I actually install it here, let me connect on the other screen to my master node and quickly start a watch on kubectl get pod kube system so that we can see what's actually happening. Right now it's just the default Kubernetes pods running in kube system, but when I start installing the operator, it basically here creates the Portworx operator. So this is the piece that basically controls my Portworx installation. So it waits for a storage cluster object to be created, and once it sees that, it will use that to deploy and maintain or even upgrade our Portworx installation. So a really simple way, a really straightforward way to manage my Kubernetes environment. So I could go ahead and apply this long line. I can also just download the spec files, and if I open that up in Visual Studio, I can see a little bit more details on the installation. So here, this is the storage cluster object I was talking about. It references the version we're installing. You can also see that it has the device specifications for the VMware devices that need to be created. And it also includes the details of that vSphere integration that we talked about. So for now, this looks good. So let me just copy all of this. And then here in my master node in the green side, I'll just create the storage cluster.yaml, paste all the data, save it, and then I'll go ahead and apply the storage cluster. So what we should see now is that the Portworx operator is basically picking up on that storage cluster that's being created, and it starts deploying my actual Portworx containers over here. So I skipped some steps in the docs, but this is all documented here, right? It explains how you should create all the storage integration, what customization you can do, basically applying that spec file. And then finally here we can see what the status is of the cluster. So going back in here, we see that the Portworx pods are still creating. As soon as one of them has started creating, I'll go into the log files so that we can get a little bit more details on what's happening. Kubectl logs, kube system, and I'll hit the logs of this specific pod. There we go. And I should also add the pod name, and then let's follow the log. So basically everything has started up. We can see that Portworx is just getting started. It's going into a running state. And then from there on, what we'll see is that it will slowly start to boot up. And as it realizes that it does not have local storage available, we should see that it's starting to reach out. There we go. No local attached drives. So what I was trying to do now is actually generate a VMDK on my vSphere environment and attaching that to the node. So if I go back into my vSphere environment and look at one of the storage nodes, let me quickly give it a refresh. We can see that the provision size is now increased. If I go into one of those nodes and go into the disks, I can see that a new disk was created. Let me quickly do that by editing the details. There we go. So it's created that 175 gigabytes disk drive. And the next step, what it will do is also create the 32 gigabyte drive that we specified, right? So this is really where Portworx automatically provisions the storage that's required for these environments. In vSphere, you can see that this one has already had the second drive added as well. So if I go into the details of this one, can basically see that the 32 gigabytes drive has also been added there. Now, obviously, this will just continue on, and soon all of the environments will be ready. Again, here we can basically follow the deployment. We can see that this one is already up and running, so it reports 3 out of 3 ready pods, so that's one's up and running. And the one that we're trailing over here has just also said that the node status is reporting healthy. So there we go, it reports healthy as well. So let's go out of the logging. Let me quickly SSH into node 1-1. And there we can see Pixie Cuddle status. We can basically now see that all the 3 nodes that I'm using are up and running. They're all healthy and everything works the way it's supposed to be. Cool. So that was installing Portworx on top of vSphere. I hope you enjoyed this recording. If you have any questions, please reach out to us.